See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland.
By this time, the crowd, unwieldy and stepping on each other's toes, numbered into the thousands. But Jesus' primary concern was his disciples. He said to them, "Watch yourselves carefully so you don't get contaminated with Pharisee yeast, Pharisee phoniness. You can't keep your true self hidden forever. Before long, you'll be exposed. You can't hide behind a religious mask forever. Sooner or later, the mask will slip, and your true face will be known. You can't whisper one thing in private and preach the opposite in public. The day is coming when those whispers will be repeated all over town."
See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?
I'm speaking to you as dear friends. Don't be bluffed into silence or insincerity by the threats of religious bullies. True, they can kill you, but then what can they do? There's nothing they can do to your soul, your core being. Save your fear for God, who holds in hand your entire life, body and soul.
I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland.
I've come to start a fire on this earth. How I wish it were blazing right now. I've come to change everything, turn everything right side up. How I long for it to be finished. Do you think I came to smooth things over and make everything nice? Not so. I've come to disrupt and confront.
See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland.
And then he turned to the crowd. When you see clouds coming from the west, you say, "Storm's coming," and you're right. And when the wind comes out of the south, you say, "This will be a hot one," and you're right. Frauds. You know how to tell a change in the weather, so don't tell me you can't tell me a change in the season, the God season we're in right now. You don't have to be a genius to understand these things. Just use your common sense.
See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?
We know, It's the kind of knowing that needs to be remembered. Thresholds are one of those things we know. When we move from one room to another, from one stage of life to another, from one place to another, at the threshold, we're no longer where we were, but we haven't fully arrived to the place where we're going. It's an in-between place. You pass through thresholds. You don't live in the doorway. "Are you going in or out?" my mother would call to me as I stood with the front door of the house open on a cold winter's day. "In or out?" A threshold is a place of motion as we pass through from one place or time to another. Thresholds can be short or long. When we move from one house to another, maybe one city or province or country to another, the threshold is long because there's a lot of in-between time, a lot of no longer there, but not yet really here, a long threshold of packing up, leaving, arriving, unpacking, settling. The threshold can be exciting, exhilarating, exhausting, hard to let go of what was. Thresholds can be messy. And when we move from childhood to adolescence, we're on the threshold of one life stage to another. We even have a name for it, a tween. That's when you're no longer a child, but not yet a card-carrying adolescent. It may be when you still want to listen to Donny Osmond, but not yet Led Zeppelin, or more recently Ariana Grande, but not yet Drake. We all know something. Was that a bad? Sorry, the technicians are laughing at the example. I asked reliable sources. We all know something about thresholds because we came into the world passing through the threshold of the birth canal. Our first lesson was the pressure of the threshold into the world. And whether you listen to a conversation over coffee, or the news, or interviews with authors, politicians, or activists, there seems to be widespread agreement. Our society, probably the world at large, is in crisis. This is a threshold moment. As one person said in last week's coffee hour, folks, there's no going back. And take note, it doesn't happen often, but every once in a while the world comes to a moment like this, a tipping point from what was to what might be, and for better or worse, we've seen thresholds before. 9/11. You don't need to spell out the date or the detail. Everyone knows when and what happened on 9/11. The years of 1965 to 1968 in the United States, civil rights, the protests of the Vietnam War, race riots, the assassinations of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., and Bobby Kennedy. It was a pivotal time. Jump back just a few years to 1962, they tried to stop Tommy Douglas with death threats. And when that didn't work, they bombed his home. But he still didn't stop from ushering in a legislation for universal health care in Saskatchewan, and the nation followed shortly thereafter, and today we live with the benefits of that threshold moment. Go back a bit further, the Great Depression, the Gutenberg printing press were watershed moments and changed everything. The birth and life of Muhammad, of Jesus, of Buddha, were threshold moments that shaped the world we know today. And long, long ago, the day humans discovered the benefits of fire, our ancestors passed through a threshold and the future was changed. What about now? Is this a threshold moment? CBC host Michael Enright asked this of Mary Heister Reid, who argued that a national child care policy is the essential ingredient for our economic recovery. Like caregivers for our elders, those who provide care for our children are grossly undervalued and often underpaid, to the detriment of the resilience of our economy and our community, our social fabric, she argued. Considering the habit of inertia, though, Michael asked, will anything change? And she replied, if we wanted to. So often that's what it comes down to, isn't it? If we wanted to. We can't wait for government to make the changes we desire and then complain when they don't. In many ways, we are the government. And the same goes for God. Change will come, but not by sticking our hands in our pocket and kicking the dirt at our feet, waiting for God to come around and fix this broken world. Yes, God is at work. Yes, deserts can bloom and joy shall come even in the wilderness. But one of the best ways God activates change is by working through us. Will it change? Will anything change? Will anything good come from this pandemic? This COVID-19 virus has peeled back the veil that has thinly covered numerous injustices. It's scraped away a thin veneer, revealing the underlying racism that has been there, it seems, forever. I hope 2020 is our year of seeing more clearly, with hard realities and future possibilities more clearly in focus, more sharply defined. Will things change? Will we change? A member of the St. Andrews Wesley congregation sent an email, and she suggested we should circle this date in our calendar for next year, June 28th, 2021, and next to it, write the question, What have I done to help create change in the work of reconciliation or climate change or anti-racism or the opioid crisis? Take your pick. There are lots of things to dedicate your life to, pour your energies into. But how can we hold ourselves accountable individually and as a community? Will we change? The Jesuit theologian and paleontologist Teilhard de Chardin wrote, "Someday, after mastering winds, waves, tides, and gravity, we shall harness the energy of love. And for the second time in the history of the world, we will have discovered fire." Is this a threshold moment that will harness the energy of love and release into the beleaguered world a Pentecostal fire? I am about to do a new thing, and now it flares forth. Can you perceive it? Some in power seem to actively work against this and say, don't look, nothing new is happening here. It's just the same old world you're so fond of and used to. Well, Jesus had a special name for such people, false prophets. The pandemic is not so bad, they say. It's way overblown by the liberal media. Oh, but if you come to a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, would you please sign this waiver assuring us that you won't sue in case you get sick with COVID-19? There's no climate crisis, they say. Keep pumping that oil. Racism is not so bad, they say. We live in a country of equal opportunity for all, right? Sexism is not so bad. I know a woman who's a successful CEO, and my GP is a woman. What's the problem? Free market capitalism is not so bad. Just get government out of the way, deregulate everything, and people will naturally take care of each other and the environment, right? And CEOs who make 1,000 times more than the average salary of their employees, that's just the natural order of things, right? Denial can be a survival technique. Denial can also be very dangerous. If that volcano's not going to erupt, just ignore the steam venting out, ignore the rumbling earth. That volcano's not going to erupt. Boom. In a threshold moment, it's critical to know who are the false prophets and who are the genuine voices worth listening to. But now, I think there's a kind of awakening. The pandemic and other events have pulled back the veil, and more of us see things differently now. Black lives and Indigenous lives matter, rethinking drug policies, the cruelty of warehousing our elders, and ensuring fair pay for caregivers, a reconsideration of who falls under the name essential workers. All of this points to a threshold moment. We rest on the brink, near a tipping point, and hear the question being asked, will it change? Will anything change? And the reply, if we choose to. We know thresholds. We live in a threshold time now, and once again, God is playing Jenga and is about to do a new thing. Watch for where and when and how it springs forth, and then get off your couch and write a letter to your mayor or city councilor or MLA or MP or prime minister. Join a march and hold an important sign if you feel so moved. Talk to people who think differently than you. Donate to an important cause. Will anything change? If we want it to. And as always, God is ahead of us, already at work, doing a new thing. Already it springs forth around us and within us. Can you perceive it? My daughter, Catherine, told me about a poem that has gone viral. And she said it names the time and captures the hope many of us feel pumping inside. The poem is by Leslie Dwight, who plays on the phrase 2020 canceled. And it's a phrase that came about because so many people were so discouraged by all of the things in their life that has been canceled, the things that have been canceled over the last 3 months. And we heard a little bit about some of those things in the time with the children. It's led to the phrase hashtag 2020 canceled. But the poet, like the genuine prophet, invites us to see differently. What if 2020 isn't canceled, she asks? What if 2020 is the year we've been waiting for? A year so uncomfortable, so painful, so scary, so raw, that it finally forces us to grow. A year that screams so loud, finally awakening us from our ignorant slumber. A year we finally accept the need for change, declare change, work for change, become the change. A year we finally band together instead of pushing each other further apart. 2020 isn't canceled, but rather the most important year of them all. We know threshold moments. Now is one. Something is waiting to be born in you, in us, in the world. Can you perceive it?